Dear members of the European Academy of Sciences and Arts, dear guests, once again, I would like to welcome you to our wonderful lecture series, Arts Meet Science. And once again, the two deans of the arts and medicine classes, Violeta Dinescu and Dušan Šuput, have put together an exciting program. One lecture deals with a topic in music theory that has occupied us many times in this lecture series: symmetries in music. Today, using the example of palindromic processes. Since the Pythagoreans, music has been counted among the mathematical disciplines of the so-called quadrivium of geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. And following Pythagoras, these four disciplines express the symmetry and harmony of the universe in geometric and arithmetic proportions, which become audible in the sounds of astronomical models of the spheres. And even in the beginning of modern times, Johannes Kepler still called his main work on heliocentric astronomy world harmony, Weltharmonik in German. Mathematically, translations, reflections, and rotations are understood as symmetry operations that can be analyzed in a musical space. The musical space is understood, such as in geometry, as a vector space that is spanned by the three dimensions of time, frequency, and dynamics. Translations in the time direction can be interpreted as tone repetitions, in the frequency direction as parallel tuning, and in the dynamics as crescendo or diminuendo. Rotations can be analyzed around the dynamic axis, that means in the note plane of time and frequency. Reflections in the time frequency plane corresponds to a rise and fall in volume or vice versa. Reflections on the vertical, that means on the frequency dynamic plane, are well known. This is the so-called crab, which appears frequently in the 15th and 16th centuries and is finally used in the classical examples of Bach, for example, in his musical offering, Musikalisches Opfer, and systematically in the 20th century in the serial music of Schönberg's 12-tone techniques. The symmetries known from ornamental reliefs can also be found in the composition of musical notation right up to the modern era. Now, in modern cosmology, you remember in the antique music theory, the parallel with astronomy. In modern cosmology, the various basic forces of the universe are characterized by symmetry structures. Even more exciting than the symmetries are the symmetry breaking, when metaphorically a fundamental basic structure, such as a symmetrical mosaic in a vaulted ceiling, breaks into many partial symmetries as a result of a spontaneous event. This is in modern physics how we explain the origin of the diversity of the universe today from a common basic structure before the Big Bang, by symmetry breaking of an original symmetric order. Symmetries play a major role in Jewish art, in Islamic art, and in Christian art. Remember the mosaics and ornaments in the Islamic mosques, in Jewish synagogues, and Christian cathedrals. Despite these similarities in the history of art and science, the conflicts between the Abrahamic religions in political history have been terrible right up to the present day. The second lecture this evening is about the history of Jewish expulsion in the Christian tradition, but also about the progress made in the Age of Enlightenment. At that time, it was believed that all religious conflicts had been overcome. All men become brothers, as the final chorus of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony says, and today in the European anthem. Not only the development of the universe, but also that of human history is characterized by symmetry breaking with sometimes bloody conflicts and wars. Is harmony only a lost illusion? At least in music, it has become real. It's going to be exciting again tonight. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Klaus. Very nice introduction again. And now I have a pleasure to introduce nearly my neighbor coming from Austria, just across the border, maybe 70 kilometers away from Ljubljana. This is Monika CZERNIN, who was born in 1965 in Austria, and she studied political science, philosophy, and journalism in Vienna. And even as a student, she already worked at Austrian Broadcasting. So she's very well known, and she's also a member of our academy. She's also internationally appreciated filmmaker. Just to give us a few titles, Maria Theresa, Majesty and Mother, Atatürk, Father of Modern Turkey, and then also there's a user's guide to Vienna, and I lead to briefly the story of Countess Nora Kinsky. So just a couple of titles, very interesting. And there's a book of Anna Zachar and her hotel, a famous place in Vienna, and everybody knows Zachar cake. So it probably comes from, yeah, it comes from this place. The other thing which is quite important is now we come to history and about Enlightenment, and she also explained in detail about in the title The Temperate Trials Incognita about Joseph II at the time of European Enlightenment. So at the end, I must say that she's an author of about 100 books and magazine titles. And I'm really very interested in listening to her lecture about fate of Jews in Europe through centuries up till today, I think. So please give your lecture. We don't hear you.
Mute, and then I have to share.
Now we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you. Thank you so much for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to speak in front of such a fantastic audience. There is an excursus for Professor Mainzer, especially in my talk, because I used AI-powered software to make this presentation. And I think we are all experimenting a lot with AI these days and making interesting and even funny experiences. The program I used is Gamma AI, which makes presentations in minutes. But in the end, I changed everything: the text, the pictures, the format. Only this AI-generated picture of Prague, which you see here, I kept. It is very beautiful, but as you can see, it's full of mistakes. This is an experience, at least I have done so many times with AI tools. They are beautiful, but full of mistakes. But back to my topic, the expulsion of the Jews from Prague and the aim of this presentation. First, I would like to give you a brief impression of the film I did. Then I would like to say a few words about the book I'm currently writing on the topic and what will be different to the book. And after that, I shed some light on my research and I delve into the main themes. Something is wrong because I can't. Now, yeah, the story. In December 1744, on 18th of December 1744, Maria Theresa, shortly before the birth of her 7th child, issues an order that strikes like thunder to the Habsburg Empire and is echoed throughout Europe. All Prague Jews are to leave the city. After centuries of anti-Jewish persecution in Christian Europe, the expulsion of the Jews from Prague is the last act of terror against Jews in old Europe decreed by a ruler before the Holocaust. A countdown begins, a battle in which half of Europe stands up for the Jewish inhabitants of Prague. For the first time, the unjust order of a monarch leads not only to the outcry of a few Stadtlands and so on, but to a modern protest campaign. And we will see how this happened. But first, a few words on the film. It was a co-production from Austrian broadcasters, Bavarian broadcaster, Arte, and the Czech television. And the ORF film premiered shortly after the Hamas attack on 7th October 2023, which underlined the great relevance of the subject in a particularly tragic way. A lot of people, after seeing the film, were amazed because, and that is an interesting fact, they knew so little or even nothing about the Jewish history of Europe before the Holocaust. And that's why I made this film, because I wanted to address the history of Jews in Europe before the Holocaust. And I hope I could demonstrate with this film this long tradition of Christian and Jews living together, as well as anti-Jewish sentiments in Christian Western civilization. In fact, one can say to a certain extent that anti-Judaism is inscribed in the DNA of Christian West. It is therefore hardly surprising that the topic is so actual. The book. In my book, which I'm now writing, I will use novel-like and documentary passages alike, like in my previous books on Emperor Joseph II or even Anna Sacha. Why do I use partly a novelistic narrative style? Because in my opinion, the emotional dimension of the subject will be much better understood if the reader identifies with the protagonists and immerses himself in the epoch of the expulsion. And also, and one has to say, it will not be an academic book and not for the academic audience only, but it will be a book for the very wide audience. And also, as we shall see, academic historians cannot answer some of the main questions of the subject. And this is a great chance for a novelist. But I did make my research. And apart from all the academic articles on the subject, apart from all the books on Jewish history, on Maria Theresa and 18th century and Enlightenment reforms and so on, I want to highlight some primary sources which are very interesting. I found out about the subject by reading Barbara Stolberg-Brillinger's great biography on the Empress Maria Theresa. And Stolberg writes about the expulsion of the Jews from Prague. As I read this passage, always with an ear to the ground for good stories and potential films, I got the impression that she was basing her narrative on detailed primary sources because it was so vivid and so detailed. And there's a story behind it. Wolf Wertheimer, the court Jew who organized the whole protest campaign, he kept all the letters he got and he copied his own letters exactly. Somehow in the 1920s, this jumble ended up in the newly established Jewish Museum in Prague. Salomon Lieben, then the director of the museum and archivist, transcribed all the letters and translated them from Hebrew into German. Thanks God, because the original letters were lost in the 1930s. And till now, till today, the experts of the Jewish Museum are searching for these letters, who are somewhere dumped in nowhere, but they didn't find it till now. Others fantastic findings I made are, of course, in my beloved archive in Vienna, the Haus-, Hof- and Staatsarchiv, which you have next, like Maria Theresa's edict, etc. And in the cabinet files, I found a report on the economical crisis followed the expulsion. This is a very interesting document because it lists every economical sector in Bohemia, no matter how small, and counts the losses caused by the expulsion. And then, of course, you have the State Archive in Prague with a lot of fantastic documents where it been, and the Jewish Museum. For example, as presented here, this is a passport, is a sogenannte Phase, and this was issued to every Jew who came back in 1748. It's a great source because with this document and, for example, taxation lists of the Jewish community in Prague, it is possible to know exactly who had been this community by name, income status, amount of servants, etc., etc. Why the expulsion of the Jewish community in Prague was such a shock in the whole of Europe? This picture shows the so-called zierlicher Auszug, which is today exposed in the Jewish Museum in Prague. This is an engraving that the community leader Simon Frankl had made in 1744 of the procession of Prague Jews on the occasion of the baptism of Joseph II in 1741. And here you can see in detail how great, how proud, how wealthy, and how big the Jewish community in Prague was. It was the largest and one of the oldest communities in Europe. Amsterdam and London, of course, were big too. Constantinople, even bigger. But 1/4 of the population of Prague at the time had been Jewish. This is a lot. And unlike in the rest of the Holy Roman Empire, the Jews from Prague had many privileges, and they were allowed to work not only in trade and finance, but also as craftsmen. And the privilege given by Rudolf II granted the Jews in 1577 to settle in Prague forever. So this Maria Theresa ignored for sure. Despite the whole protest campaign, she merciless expelled the Jews and brought senseless sufferings upon 10,000 people who had to leave Prague in March 1744, and then again in June 1746. But unlike the expulsion of the Protestants from Salzburg in 1731 and other examples, the Jews from Prague were allowed to return in summer 1748. Why? They had to pay 300,000 gulden toleration tax. That was a lot. The Jewish town was looted, but they got their homes back and rebuilt them with the Christian community of Prague. In the 1750s, the community once again became one of the most important communities in Europe, with its famous leader, Rabbi Ezekiel Landau. And in 1755, Maria Theresa finally renewed the privilege of the Jewish community of Prague. Here we have a chronology of the events. What I want to emphasize is the following. The Succession War, started in 1740, as you know, was a big threat for Maria Theresa. She nearly lost her empire. In November 1744, rumors reached her that the Jews from Prague collaborated with the Prussians. That was the trigger event for the expulsion order. But also the nobility had been illoyal in this war. In 1742, when Karl Albrecht of Bavaria occupied Prague and had himself honored as king, the majority of the population shifted the loyalty towards him. But only the Jews were punished so heavily and collectively. In March 1045, as I said, 10,000 people had to leave Prague in bitter cold winter. Many of them died. But they stayed around the city. They commuted back because Count Kolowrat, the Statthalter of Prague, was a friend of the Jews, and he tried to help them as in everything he could. The ill and the old people, they were allowed to stay in the Jewish town, 200 people. And then the traders came back. And then life in the Jewish town got back to normal. For 1 year, from summer 45 to summer 46, none of the reports on the situation did reach Maria Theresa, and we don't know why. You see what I will do with the novel on that. And then in summer 1746, all of a sudden, Maria Theresa learned of the situation, and then she got her famous tantrum, the ärgste Pest. I even don't know how to explain that in English. And then she sent the military to expel the rest of the Jews from Prague. After that, the economical crisis started to get severe in Prague and in Bohemia. 2 major reports on that were commissioned. And in summer 48, the Jews were allowed to come back to rebuild their town with help of the Christian people. So let's come to the Europe-wide campaign. I'm trying to reconstruct the network behind this campaign, who is who, because I think in doing so, I hope I will be able to draw a picture of Jewish life throughout Europe in the mid of 18th century. And this is a very diverse picture. The campaign began with Prague and the Jewish leaders there, who sent letters from Prague to Augsburg, to Wolf Wertheimer, and also to Fürth, where they had the relatives. Then in Augsburg, the renowned court factor Wolf Wertheimer used his wide connections with Jewish communities throughout Europe, especially in Germany. And later in 1745, in summer of 1745, he also used his connections to the European nobility when peace talks between Bavaria and Habsburg took place in Augsburg and Füssen. In Vienna, Diego d'Aguilar, a Sephardic Jew from London and court banker of Maria Theresa, organized the campaign. He addressed especially the British and the Danish envoys, the Jewish communities in Italy, and which then went on to Rome and approached the Pope. And the Pope got back to Maria Theresa saying that it is that her order is against Christian charity. To have a more detailed look on the German situation, you can see that it was all based on the family network between the Jewish communities. Wolf Wertheimer wrote letters to the Jewish community in Hildesheim, where he had a stepbrother, Hirsch Oppenheim. Then he had a brother-in-law in Hamburg, Elia Oppenheim. Then he had a brother-in-law in Frankfurt, which was Moses Kahn. And then he had a son-in-law in Hanover, Rabbi Meyer Katz. There were in London was Rabbi Feibusch Breslauer. In Breslauer, we had Baruch Gomperz, and so on and so forth. So you see, there's a whole network of relatives, of important people, of rabbis, and then these people approach their monarchs, their princes, and they are very successful in doing so, because after 6 to 8 weeks, a lot of letters come back to Maria Theresa, and various European courts, they apply diplomatic pressure on her to reconsider the expulsion. Even her husband, even her mother-in-law is against the expulsion. So what is highly debated among scholars is the question, was the campaign successful? One can say no, because it failed. Maria Theresa did not remove the edict. On the other hand, one can say the campaign reached an enormously large and influential group of people, the King of England and Denmark, die Fürstbischöfe, Prince bishops of Mainz and Köln, even the Pope, as I said. All this in itself was already a big success concerning the isolation of society groups and classes, and especially the isolation of the Jewish community. It shows that the Jewish communities at this time had a broad network, not only among itself, but also to the Christian communities. In January 45, everybody in Vienna was against the order. That Maria Theresa, as an absolute monarch, did not remove the edict should not be taken as proof of failure, I think. I mentioned already the economical consequences of the expulsion. In 1746, the economical consequences slowly became visible. This also strengthened the opposition of the expulsion order in Vienna, in the Viennese government. And there was a commission under Count Ferdinand Harrach set up to analyze all areas of the Bohemian economy and calculate the economic damage. And this is a very interesting document, because it lists the losses of bakers, millers, carpenters, soap boilers, couriers. The report is basically an Excel sheet from the early modern period. And to make things worse, Maria Theresa's Chancellor, Count Friedrich Wilhelm von Haugwitz, travels to Prague because he wants the estates to pay higher taxes. Following the War of Succession, Maria Theresa needs money, around 5 million gulden. However, the nobility in Prague refuses to pay up unless the Prague Jewish population are permitted to return. Then we have legal implications. But these legal implications are very seldom mentioned in the academic world. I didn't find many articles with these legal aspects. Only Stephan Wendehorst, a legal historian in Vienna, he has written widely about the topic. For example, in his article, Religious Rights Between International Law and Constitutional Law. Following Wendehorst's argument, I contend that Maria Theresa's order was not only economically disastrous, but also represented a clear break of established legal norms, especially 18th century international law. Wendehorst is arguing that Maria Theresa disregards the privileges given to the Jews of Prague and therefore violating existing protective rights and international agreements. The English King George II even argues in his protest note to Vienna with this legal aspect. Wendehorst even goes so far in his argument that he sees a breach of international law as the reason why the Jews are allowed to return to Prague in 1745. Nobody else says that. So what is the historical significance of this topic? For the first time, as political scientist Shlomo Avineri has said, European Jews acted as a people, albeit without a state, in their protest campaign. And so the campaign had the effect of increasing self-confidence of the Jewish community in Prague before the age of religious tolerance. It remains to be seen whether the revocation of the edict was due to negative economic consequences or whether it was due to the violation of international law, which came to the attention of Maria Theresa as a result of the campaign. Thank you.
Well, thank you. A very interesting lecture. I think we'll have questions later on. And now, Violeta, it's your turn, please.
Thank you so much. And I just see also our Dean of Class 2 Science, Class 4 Science, and also our Vice President Birgit Harris. I would just ask Birgit 2 words, please, before I present Vladimir Skolnik.
Okay, thank you, Violeta. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the very, very interesting lecture of MONIKA CZERNIN. And I just say good evening, and now I'm waiting for the next lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to present now Professor Vladimir Skolnik. He is a professor, he's a composer. He is born in Ukraine, grew up in Romania, and emigrated to Israel, where he is living now. Vladimir Skolnik is a former dean of the Faculty of Theory, Conducting, Composition, Musical Education, and chair of Theory and Conducting Composition Department at the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. His international activities are polyphonic and very cosmical. Vladimir Skolnik was invited to participate as a member of prestigious national and international juries of composition in America, in Romania, we could say all over the world, in very many countries. Various aspects of Vladimir Skolnik's music have been researched in doctoral dissertations written in Europe. As I told today when I spoke with Oliver Korte, he's our composer and also he is present here and also a member of our class 3. He is a composer having also a heart for science. So there are, we could say, two kinds of composers. Composers composing with the heart directly, and composing with have in the heart also really scientific ideas. And Vladimir Skolnik is also a very interesting analyzer. He was invited to lecture and give master classes, workshops based on his ideas, methods of teaching and theoretical achievements in universities and other higher learning institutions in America, Colombia, Russia, Romania, Spain, Poland, and so on. His music was selected for performance in prestigious international festivals of contemporary music all over the world. And his music, I have here so many countries I could tell you. His music is also in the same time full of inspiration. And it's interesting that I told you at the very beginning, he was born in Ukraine, grew up in Romania, where he also learned a lot in the conservatorium and emigrated to Israel. So you can imagine that with his sensitivity, he absorbed musical tradition of different parts of the where he was living, and his music is like a complex structure who also at the same time has the possibility to absorb also technical way of thinking of constructing music. So I'm very happy to invite, you have the floor, Vladimir.
Yes. Hello. Can I start?
Yes, we can hear you.
Please. Yeah.
Hello to everybody. In the history of music, as well as in the history of the other arts, composers and other creators have looked for symmetrical proportions, processes, means, or related ideas as a way of expressing the aesthetic of beauty in their works. They consider nature and first and foremost the human body as the main source of that aesthetic. Looking at ourselves, we can easily discover that our body is built symmetrically. Thus, we have two hands which are not identical, two legs which are also not identical, two non-identical sides of our face, and so on. All these body parts are mirroring one another. They complete each other, and together they form a symmetrical body structure. The body or certain parts of the body are symmetrical axes for the mentioned hands, legs, etc. For example, the nose is the symmetrical axis for the two opposed symmetrical sides of our face. In music, symmetrical techniques such as retrograde or inversion structures were developed especially in polyphonic styles. In the 14th century, the French composer Guillaume de Machaut wrote a music called Ma fin est mon commencement, et mon commencement est ma fin. My end is my beginning, and my beginning is my end, which is a musical palindrome. Let's listen to this music. Okay. Just a moment. Skip. as we can see, the music, the one verse is sang by the performers as it is usual, and the other one from the right to left. That each verse has the same music, but looking from different angles, from the beginning to the end and from the end to the beginning. And this is a palindrome. Another composer, which already was mentioned before, is Bach, with his musical offering. Can we also listen and see what happens with this canon, Bach's canon? יצאת משם. זה. This is Bach's musical offering crab canal. A crab canal is built on two structures that are complementary and backward, like a palindrome. During the polyphonic periods of polyphonic styles, composers looked for these symmetries, but during the harmonical, classical, romantic period, there are not so many examples. But despite that, we have an example of Haydn's 47th Symphony in G major, where the third part, minuet, and is also a palindrome. I will not continue with these examples because my time will go very fast. But during the contemporary 20th century and 21st century, there were many composers who use these ideas of symmetry and like Bartók, Kramp, Stravinsky, Anatol Vieru, and so on. I'll go directly to the presentation of my music, which uses these ideas. Just a minute, kid. And select no, no, איפה זה? להיכנס My lecture is related to the tradition as a source for renewing compositional techniques in contemporary music. But I'll go directly to my music now. Excuse me. But before, I would like to read a text, this text, a poem. I don't know, and there is no place I could find who wrote this poem. Okay.
Art creates life,
Life creates art,
forever changing and lasting impressions.
impressions lasting and changing forever.
Paintbrushes swirling with dancing colors.
Colors dancing with swirling paintbrushes.
Perfect images create masterpieces.
Masterpieces create images perfect.
Visions painted on canvas, living.
Living canvas on painted visions.
Gratefully breathing.
Breathing gratefully.
Newborn creations.
Creations newborn. Become. As you can see, this poem is a palindrome, has a symmetrical axis, and is going from the left to right, from the beginning to the outside, and all the other way. Let's go further, please. I wanted to explain some things about the palindromic interval structure, but it is only one thing I would say, that if you look to this structure, to this scheme, we can see that there are two numbers, 3 and 5, and here 5 and 3. The 3 and 5 is the major chord, the 5 and 3 is the minor chord. The relation between the major and minor chord is a palindromic relations with an intervallic axis. I'll not go further, and I'll continue with what is a process. The process is practically an accumulation or many accumulations of sound data and sound events. When we have a proposal, A, which is a music, not only a scheme. I have a time axis, I have a stage 2, which is a retrograded, say, and we have different possibilities to work in different moments in order to create palindromic processes in music. Go further. I'll put you the music called Perplexity, which is built on symmetrical processes, on palindromic processes. This music was, as you can see, was written in 2002 under the influence of the September 11th events, because at that time I was in my sabbatical and I was living near WTC. Excuse me. Perplexity was the feeling people felt during those days, to look for something different, but somehow similar in that atmosphere of confusion and grief, was a task the composer intended to fulfill through music. That's why the music of Perplexity is looking in unusual ways for a musical pure relation of a perfect fifth. Here you can see the way musical processes were built in the 4 sections of the Perplexity. For the first section, per, it is a palindrome. A proposal of A, or no. And A back. Okay. The second plex is B, is a proposal. And this proposal finds his answer in the last and the 4th movement, B here. Then we have the I, which is also C and C, that they are both building a palindrome. And we have the last movement. It has on one side the B, which is the answer to first B, and the A plus A palindrome. Just to have we finish first palindrome, then we have another one from this movement, and the plus C. Okay. Before putting you the recording, I'll show you on musical notes how it works. Here you have the A, only 3 pitches, but many colors, timbral colors. Then you'll see the second, the plex, which is inverse to this. It's retrograde. The fourth part is the retrograde to the second one. And all the other things are here hidden. Let's listen a little bit to them, to the music. score. Okay, this was the piece. Now I would like to show you another piece for orchestra, which was written as a palindrome. You can see the piece is called, first of all, Colors Memories, and was renamed to Macbeth because of some similarities with Shakespeare's drama. And you can see the processual chain. The forward process, introduction, transition, development, the access, and here, introduction, transition, development. After this, you have the concluding episode, which is not part of the palindrome, and coda. I can put you this music only for 1-2 minutes, and after that, I'll finish. Okay, it is good. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry if there were some outbursts too surprising. And here we have frequently asked question by my daughter many years ago, and never asked questions my son, which is near me, which is many years ago. Okay. Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you also. When you shall send us the presentation, you may also put the score. I would suggest the whole score of the first place especially.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's possible. It's wonderful. I see we have here some composers. I suppose I would like also to ask, but first, Dušan, I would say we can begin with our commentary and discussions. Would you
Yes,
like
please do.
to begin?
I
Thank you.
don't see any hand. Is anybody here that would like to ask a question? Okay. Klaus, you'd like to start with questions.
I'm looking for my hand here, but
No,
don't
I
find
I thought virtual hand.
yeah. Yeah, very impressing this evening, I must say, especially with the music on the one side and then the political reality. And I try to combine it a little bit in order to underline the profile of our academy, which also means we consider history, politics, and on the other side, the structures of music. Now, my question, let me start with the musical theory. Symmetry in general in science means reduction of complexity. We have a huge complex collection of data in science everywhere, and then we are looking for some structure, for some ordering structure. That means reduction of complexity. And the same seems to be now in the musical examples we heard this evening. And now symmetry breaking, my question is now, in the last examples, which have the nice names perplexity and the processual chain, there the symmetries are given up. There are sometimes very complex structure, at least that is my feeling. And what do you think? Question to the composer. Is that for you an illustration of symmetry breaking? These sudden abrupt tones and then changing the structure abruptly. And perplexity, you know the meaning of perplexity. We are perplexed sometimes. And that means we are surprised and we're looking for some order. And so perplexity seems to me, your piece of music named Perplexity, an example for this kind of symmetry breaking. Now, I like to hear your comment.
Thank you for your question. First of all, music, like any other thing we are doing in our life, is a balance between order and, let's say, disorder. That's why, but here in this music, everything was very specifically planned from the point of view of symmetry, because we have a number of pitches which you could see that there are not too many, but a lot of colors. The same pitch can be played with using many possibilities of instruments, of various instruments. Then and the way we work with symmetry, it's not only mathematically defined. We understand some of the things, not of course not many, but we understand. And the process is when the music develops and it uses a base. Excuse me? You said something. For me? No, okay, let's go. Then sometimes things are are done very mechanically, like you take from the left to right, from the right to left, but it's not this, because even if you go to the music from one direction to another direction, everything changes, time change, first of all. And not only time changes, also space, because we have musical spaces which are formed in our mind. And this is the difference between the space which is defined maybe physically. My son is studying physics, master in physics at Technion in Israel. And he plays also 5 instruments, and we have sometimes discussions about these things. And I think that the composer is a kind of architect. He composes, writes the music, and there have to be performers, engineer, workers, everything to done the project. Without them, there is no music. I hope somehow I answered you a little bit. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
I must unmute. You know, when I was listening to the music and looking at how do you make it, I was trying to think about composing. I'm not a musician. Well, if I play with symmetry and things like that, do you think I could just make music the way you did, or you had a musical idea about how the music will look, well, not look, but how it will be heard in the end? So that's a question for you. And I also have a question for Monika Chernin, because you explained a very short period where big changes happened. Very nasty thing, but is it so that, well, the consequences were quite bad for Austria and for Prague especially. But is it the pattern that whenever something happens very rapidly, good or bad, it will disturb society deeply? I don't want to go too much in detail because it was a nasty thing about Hamas, and now there's a rebound effect and so on. But just a simple question, because we live in our time pace, and maybe things, if they happen too rapidly, will always cause something bad. So these were my questions, sir.
Thank you very much for this question, because it's so true. And I'm saying, when writing this book or making this film, I was always thinking about the actuality, or how do you say actuality? You have a lot of parallels in today's world, you know, politicians who are all issuing orders just out of an emotional situation, or because they are aggressive somehow. And also politicians who are acting in a very conservative or in an outdated way, because what Maria Theresa does is somehow outdated, because the time is already a time where enlightenment takes place, and 40 years later the toleration patterns will come, and so it's a new time already. And so somehow she really acts in a very stupid way and only brings senseless suffering to the people, to the Jewish people of Prague. And there is, I think, a lot of parallel things one can think about of today and of today's world and today's politics. Yeah, that's true. And I always like to make films or books on historical subjects which tell us something about our today's world, and vice versa. I think this is the sense. That's why we do history, because we want to learn something for today.
Okay, thank you very much. Now about composing, I'm really curious. How do you start with listening to what you will do, or by making symmetry with notes?
look, there is no one way of composing. And if you remember, we read a poem here.
Yes.
And I think that if you look at that poem, that your questions will be answered by rereading it. So you'll have it probably on the, it is recorded. And I'll send also the materials. Your question has the answer in this poem, by my opinion.
Okay, because I started, when I read the poem, I thought, okay, I could play. It's a kind of exercise for my brain and so on, and maybe I can make music like that too. So
It's inviting to become composer also. We have Peter Hermann and Katrin Klose. I didn't notice which of you was the first one. So let's say ladies first. So Katrin, please. You have a question, a commentary?
Hello, good evening. I think I was second, but no, I will just go ahead if that's okay. Yeah, thanks very much and congratulations to both speakers tonight. That was really interesting. I have one or maybe two little questions for Professor Solnit. And I have to give a bit of background because I recently saw this songbook with German and Jewish folk songs. And so all the German songs were written in the usual way, I would say, like also the notation from left to right. And the Jewish songs with a Hebrew text went the other way around. So the music notation went right to left also. And so first little question is that a usual way to notate music with a Hebrew text? And maybe the second question is, do you think that reading Hebrew had some kind of influence on your music or on the palindromic structures in your music?
Maybe. I don't know if reading Hebrew influences me. I was very much influenced by the Romanian thinking because I have studied in Romania, and I know many composers there, which are my friends too, and I learned from them a lot of things, and because you said about writing from the right to left. But you can write also with the Latin letters from the left to right. You understand? Then it's not influencing. Maybe other things were influenced by this way of reading in different kind of styles of writing and speaking and many other things which you can find in any culture.
I think it's very inspiring what you answered, especially for Professor Ernst Pöppel. He's a Neurowissenschaftler. I could imagine he understands a lot of what you are imagining, and with a strong musical intuition based on studies with Vieru, of course. And the result is your composition. Thank you very much. Peter Hermann. Peter Hermann has also a question. Please, Peter.
Yeah, to Vladimir Skornik, if I understood you correctly, you say actually this traditional understanding of symmetry must be overcome, and we have to get to a higher level of symmetry, to a more complex one. And this brings me to the question on complexity. We frequently refer to the reduction of complexity, but isn't in general arts just the other way around of extending complexity or dealing with complexity as it is instead of reducing it, especially if you go to new music, as well, this development of music as a form of expression that is not in the traditional way a reproduction of existence, a mathematical reflection of it, but the attempt at least to come to grasp complexity and maintain it instead of reducing it?
Thank you for your question. First of all, from my point of view, any music is a means of communication. It is based on a language, and on a language which is formed historically, which has its basic things, but it's a process. Then it's very difficult to say it's from here or from there, complex, less complex. It is related to, first of all, to the way an artist likes and thinks of communicating, because there are artists, composers who used a lot of mathematics in writing music, and the music was not so successful because it was too much related to the science and not to the communication. Also, there are other sides of composing music. When composer compose music only from the point of view of feelings, but feelings cannot communicate by themselves. Then we need a way, we need to have a vision, we need to be supported by a language which was formed historically.
Thank you. There are other questions coming in. Commentary, Oliver. Graham, wonderful. Graham is a composer and a cellist. Please. Unmute yourself, Graham. Unmute.
Yes, does it work now?
Yeah.
Good.
Good.
Just a comment. Interesting, the idea of palindrome. Of course, there are many examples in music. Among others, Telemann wrote a number of sonatas which work in palindromic form, and also, of course, Alban Berg. Just to bring up the question of similarity in language, and Schoenberg said that if you transpose the idea of palindrome into language, you get an unintelligible result. For example, he used the example of sum synagro, which no one would immediately catch upon being the reverse of organismus. So just to say that in literary terms or linguistic terms, the connections between the original and backwards are very tenuous, not to say completely unintelligible. And I gather that at Schoenberg's one of his birthday parties, they even played "Happy Birthday to You" in retrograde inversion, and the master didn't even recognize the connection to the tune of "Happy Birthday." And that begs the question, how is one expected to understand the retrograde versions of a 12-tone row if it can't even be understood with such a simple diatonic tune as "Happy Birthday"? Anyway, just to say, sort of palindromic writing is of great interest, historical, and in the present day. It's just that it runs the risk of being a slightly artificial system of writing. And maybe just to ask if and when you use palindromic techniques, if you revise the original on the basis of how the palindromic version then sounds.
Okay. First of all, the fact that we cannot recognize a structure which is played from the other way, or retrograded inversion, it is a problem of our memory, which cannot remember the other ways. It's a problem of the way we can catch things, and it's not related to the palindromic things. Because when we are going on the same highway with the car, let's say from a city to another city, and then we'll come back, there are things which change. First of all, the time changes, and then the space changes. Even it's looking like we had the same time and space. Music is first of all a problem of expressivity, but language, and usual language, is based on notions and feelings and emotions, And music, we don't have notions. We don't have emotions at all. We have expressivity of the language, which is completely different than the language used in the spoken language, than the structures. Even we have also sounds in the spoken language. Spoken language is based on notions and emotions, not music. Music is based on expressivity, which is a very complex phenomenon, which has to be studied by cognition, by my opinion. And palindromes are palindrome is only how to say.
It is a technique you use in order to express what you have to say.
Of course.
Look,
Thank you so
Ernst
much.
Pepper would like to comment this, which is interesting from, I suppose, from the neurological point of view. Please, Ernst.
Yeah, thank you very much for the two lectures. Very rich. I have a few, associations, perhaps. The first one, I think you did not mention the Silesian Wars. And so this, during that time, I think this was really a fight between Prussia and the Austrian Empire. And would you argue, or could you argue, that actually recreating symmetry, because this is a topic here, yeah? Wars are the way to recreate symmetry. So that is first remark. Then with respect to music, Richard Wagner once said, you have understood a musical piece only if you have understood the tempo. So you didn't refer to that, but it could be perhaps that your music, which we heard, sounds very differently, when you change the tempo. Then with respect to the poem you showed, I actually have invented hourglass poems, which you can read from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom. So that's possible. Yeah, so that was a few remarks, perhaps, and then a remark maybe for the physicists here. There's always a question whether we can actually discover whether other planets in the universe have life or not. Yeah? And I think what to make the point is symmetry point. Living organisms actually can move only if they have a symmetric structure to move forward. Yeah? So if we would discover symmetry in other galaxies, we would know that the life exists. So thank you much for letting me ask these questions and making these comments.
Thank you very much. I answer quickly. First, I mentioned the succession wars and the Silesian wars. They were part of the succession wars, in fact. So first, the Bavarian Karl Albrecht came to Prague in 42, and then the Prussians overtook Prague. And yes, Maria Theresa, biggest enemy was Frederick II, of course, but I think she just took this event and also this supposedly illoyalty of the Jewish community as an excuse to expel them. And I think she had it in mind even before the war started, even before she came on the throne, because it was so much into her family tradition to do something against this very big community. And in Austria, as you probably know, the community was already expelled in 1670 by her grandfather. So there were nearly no Jews left, just a few court Jews. And so it was always discussed how to get rid of these masses of Jews in Bohemia and Moravia. And And so I don't think there is a symmetry in the sense of Frederick taking Prague and then she expelling the Jews. It's more a kind of explosion which had been prepared for a long time.
Yeah, my general point was, wars are these a means on the geopolitical scene to recreate or create symmetry?
The wars.
Yeah, wars, the function of wars, are they to re-establish symmetry on a geopolitical level?
Yes, in a way. This is always true for wars. But then it's interesting. Then we come to this succession war. And there's a really interesting and very actual point in that too, that in fact in 43, Maria Theresa is conquering a lot back. So the way is stable. So she would have symmetry in 43, but then she doesn't stop the war, because then she says, I will not give an inch to Frederick or to the others. And then in 44, the situation changes again, and she is losing a lot of this symmetry again. And I think this is very typical. If you are in a war, you can't stop. And you can't stop at the moment where it is the best to stop a war.
Thank you.
May I ask something? What I missed the point. What is the symmetry in these wars? I'm not sure if maybe if you look very locally, but I don't see any symmetry in that.
Symmetry here means the physical meaning.
Okay, the physical
The equilibrium.
Okay, but then if we go to equilibrium, then the Big Bang should actually produce at least two universes to have symmetry.
Yeah, symmetry breaking means destabilization.
Yeah.
That's a local event, and then the whole order is destabilized. That means symmetry breaking in physics. And so the question of Ernst Pöppel was very interesting. How can
I didn't understand
these patterns to explain political and historical processes?
So,
my question to MONIKA CZERNIN is to the historian, with that in mind, pattern and order, can we learn from history? Of course, it's a master question to all historians. Are there patterns? What is your comment, your impression? Are there patterns in history? Example here, the Jewish question, and from which we can learn?
Well, this is a very, very big question. And a lot of historians would say no, and a lot of probably scholarly people would say no, we can't, because we repeat things, but we don't repeat them in the same way, so it's difficult to learn. But I think if we always look to history from our time, and we always try to interpret history through to the lenses of our time, and we can see a lot of details which struck us because they are the same today as well. This doesn't mean that we then learn about it, or that we can learn something, or that we can do it differently, I think. But not to know that there were a lot of similar situations before as well would be to give up a source of knowledge which we have and which we should use.
Mm-hmm.
But learning probably is a little bit too much, but we should know about it at least.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like today, I mean, we are in the middle of a new anti-Semitism in Europe, in the Near East, but it's very different from the anti-Semitism in the 18th century, of course. But of course, there are patterns which are always there. For example, the pattern that always, if there is crisis, and always, this was a big pattern for the anti-Jewish discrimination, that it always exploded when there was a big crisis, whether it was war or economic crisis or even overpopulation things or epidemics. And then you always get into this kind of problem that you need somebody to blame on, and they always blamed the Jews because of the Christian theology. That also has to be said, because the Christian theology really made it possible that they had all these excuses which were incredible, like the excuse of murdering Christ and blah blah blah. You know all of them yourself, but all these excuses were there every day in mass and every day when a priest explained something to the people. But really, it exploded always in crisis.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's begin to hope for better words. We thank you so much. Do we have other comments, other questions?
Just one question for Monika. The one who's actually defended Jews in Prague was originally Protestant. And if I remember correctly, Luther was quite strongly against Jews. Do you think that this conversion to Christianity somehow made him a bit softer, or do you think that this religious point is really the most important, or is it also personality?
That's also a very good question, because you're right. Luther had been so anti-Semitic, even though he only knew one Jew. And it's incredible, because I studied his text and you can't believe it. And you find phrases, of course, in the Nazi propaganda again. But the point I wanted to make, I think the point was that people like Haugwitz, who converted from Protestant to Christianity, to Catholicism, which was not then called yet, they made this experience that also the Protestant people from the Habsburg Empire were expelled. And I think this made them more tolerant. Also, Haugwitz was an enlightened intellectual who brought reform, state reform to the Habsburg Empire. So I think it was just more his philosophically approach to problems, and then it was and because he was modern, and then also because there are these examples of Protestants who were also expelled, and it was also not right to expel them. Yeah. On the other hand, you are right. It's not so much the religion. It's very much the class. As I have told you, that the Statthalter, so the how do you say Statthalter? So this is the leader of the city in Prague, was a Count Philip Kolowrat, and he was very much in favor of the Jews, and he helped them a lot. So the high nobility to a majority had been pro-Jewish. The traders and craftsmen, of course, because this was the concurrent situation, they were contra Jews. So they were in favor of the order of Maria Theresa. So it was a lot also a class thing. Then it was also very different if you look to Bohemia and Moravia, because you have a lot of Jews there. If you look to Austria, where you don't have any, and if you take the Holy Roman Empire, where Wolf Wertheimer sits, the situation is just, how do you say, it's it's completely different in every little spot. So in Augsburg, you don't have any Jews normally. In Swabia, you have a lot of little dukes who are in favor of the Jews. So you have a lot of communities there. then Frankfurt is a very special thing because they were never expelled because the emperors, they were protectors of the Jews. And then if you move to Hamburg, you have a very special and interesting community consisting of Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews, because to Hamburg, which was a port and a trading port, the Sephardic Jews from Spain who migrated to Amsterdam or London, they just came over to Hamburg. So there you have the most wealthy Jews of the whole Roman Empire. And then, not to speak of Rome, Venice, Turin, the Italian Jewish communities who were so diverse. So you have practically a different situation in every city. And I think this is also very, very interesting because you have to deal with so many different factors.
Thank you. Violeta, is there any other hand up? Do you see?
I do not see, but if somebody has something and you...
Otherwise, we conclude.
Okay, we meet again this year on the 20th of December with Laura Baudis, All the Dark We Can Not See, Searching for the Invisible Matter in the Milky Way, and Maria Miraglia, Poetry in Time. And we are very happy to see you again in 2 weeks. Again, once the last time in this year.
Yeah, thank you to both speakers again, and bye-bye.